I'd like to thank you very much again for being invited to give a short contribution to today's session on supply chains and disruption of supply chains. This has been a big topic in the last couple of months, and it has a lot of implications. It says that there is a shortage in bicycles, there's a shortage for electronics, there's a shortage for textiles and shoes and furniture and cars and all this. And people are blaming partly globalization for that and telling us that there will be a cut in the supply lines. We have certainly problems in terms of raw materials for the production of solar, for batteries, and all this kind of stuff, which is in demand now very much. The 40 feet container now costs more than 14 or 15,000 US dollar compared to $2,500. So that's 6 times as much compared to 2019. So this is really a major issue. Now, the question is, of course, is this going to be permanent? Is this going to be temporarily? The issues of this is the answers are not very precise, but it has obviously to do with the fact that there is a lack of supply in some areas. There is a lack of workers in ports. There is a lack of workforces, for instance, truck drivers. So if you go over and over and over, you find that there are a lot of different items involved and different episodes. A lot of people can tell us. But it has also to do, eventually, with the fact that the roots of this commodity crunch could also be eventually traced back to underinvestment in the past. So now, who is, of course, most of these countries being affected? Affected are those countries who are have a large supply, have large exports and imports. And this, of course, goes for China, this goes for Germany, and this goes for the United States. So if we look on the numbers, we find that, for instance, China's exports in the 1960s was about 2 billion. Chinese export now are 2,000, in last year, about 2,600 billion. Imports in a similar small number in 1960 increased to over 2,000 billion. And the surplus now is much larger than the trade volume was in the 70s and even in the 80s. Germany now is obviously traditionally a large exporter and importer, and the structure of foreign trade is China and Germany is very comparable. Germany probably, if you take the EU exports, Germany has about 47% of all EU exports to China and about 30% of the imports. So the German exports to China is almost half of all of the EU. If you compare that with the first trade agreement between Germany and China in the 50s, the total volume both ways was 20 million US dollar, 20 million US dollar. Now it is about 200 billion and 200 trillion, and we see an incredible development in that respect. So the surplus is to a large extent due to also for China a surplus to Germany. This is the reason why these countries are more affected than others. We see that in the present situation, the whole economic development is in a way slowed down in the corona crisis, and it has to do with the shift in demand away maybe from services and more to consumables, electronic, medical products and others, leading to a shortage of supply from a lot of sub-suppliers. Therefore, we have to define whether that is going to be a temporary development or this is going to be permanent. Even Apple warns of production delays. So it looks to be a very serious thing. It's a great time for the manufacturers of chip, but it definitely leads to cut in growth. Now, China is going to be the world champion in export, and if we take this all together, China already is contributing 28% of global growth in the last 5-6 years overall. In particular, it is of interest to see that obviously the different corona supply programs have contributed to the present situation. But I think the most important fact is this dramatic shift we see in world trade. Although since a few years, world trade has now become has slackened down and has not continued the outpace the GDP growth as we had that until about 2010 or so. So in the last couple of years, it's already leveling off the relationship between GDP growth and trade. Nevertheless, today, Asia and Europe are about more than 70% of the world trade. North America is about 14 or 14.5%. So it depends very much on how Europe and China and, of course, the United States find a proper way to deal with these present problems. It is very clear that a withdrawal into their region is out of mind. It is not possible, although quite substantial portion of the trade is in, for instance, for Germany, is inside the EU. And but we have still a lot of global problems between China and the United States. And this is a problem, but it's also a big chance because of the very strong interdependence between those areas. It is therefore important to find ways, and maybe that G20 could be a proper place to deal with this, of the redrawing of global supply lines. And China should have a particular interest in finding these solutions. The idea of some politicians all over the world to become more local, more indigenous products to be manufactured is probably only possible if we would accept a decline in well-being of the people. And we have a lot of studies which indicate us that the unilateral decoupling of the EU, for instance, or of China, or in Germany, would lead to not less growth, but to a loss of wealth. And the studies from the IFO Institute or also from the German Government Economic Advisors Council are confirming this development. Therefore, we have to find other ways, and it's not to be less global, it is to be more global. It is to not less dependent on foreign trade, but to become diversified, have the foreign trade diversified, and with this becoming less dependent from a particular region. We have to see that the three large trading blocs and economic blocs in the world, the US and EU and China, have a very important role to play that. So what we get to do is to making supply chains more resilient, and reshoring is not a way this is not a solution that would create problems which, fortunately, we would not have today. We need not less, but we need even more globalization, but maybe in a slightly different way than we have been used to that. Today, much more talk is about innovation. And innovation, actually, in the long run, is much more important than trade. In particular, that innovation is much more important based on growing knowledge than hardware product. China, in that respect, has the basis for being a major player in the innovation game in the world. The combination of innovation and entrepreneurship is the key driver of economic growth. So to have good rules for innovative ideas, this is something the world should concentrate on. And we need to have that in order to push the transformation process. So as innovation is more important than trade and globalization, so innovation is the driver of both of it. Multinational activity as a share of global production has fallen in the aftermath of the financial crisis. So on the other hand, we see that China now, in terms of capital flows, is the number one for the intake of foreign direct investments. Taking this all together, it is so important that there is an increased cooperation, not less, between the major players. And it is about to achieve common prosperity in an area of concrete goals, as we talking about, for instance, climate change. This only can work with global cooperation, not with less cooperation. And therefore, it is so important that we understand the importance of grassroots innovation, as our friend Edmund Phelps, the 2006 Nobel laureate, has published, and with his book being in China a bestseller. So the conclusion is that cooperation is rather necessary than confrontation as a basis for a new globalization, which means that we have to make more efforts even to understand each other better, and making work the knowledge which has been acquired, the knowledge which has been a part through the financial flows in the past. And we see there is a lot of capital in the world to be invested, more than ever before. So that is actually, therefore, would be another globalization in terms of the dissemination of knowledge, the dissemination of technology, and the dissemination of entrepreneurship would lead to what has been said more often, to joint prosperity, not only in one country, in China, but all over in the world. Thank you very much.